Welcome back to the SwimSwam Breakdown. I'm today's host, Coleman Hodges, coming to you from my hometown of Columbia, Missouri. We are joined by David Clossy from St. Cloud, Minnesota, aka the Swim Scribe. If you haven't checked out David's YouTube channel, it is at the Swim Scribe. He tells great swimming stories in a great way. He puts out really fun video content. David, I'm excited to see where the Swim Scribe goes, especially leading into trials and Olympics. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the shout out, Coleman, and thanks for having me on. I'm excited to kind of get in and discuss some of these nerdy topics because no one else in my life will. So I need someone who I can, rather than just talking to myself in the car, to talk about, man, do you see that going on? And yeah, I've been trying to, with the Swim Scribe, try and get into that nerdy analytical side of swimming, as well as kind of telling some stories and finding the narratives, because I think, for people who, depending on your level of familiarity with swimming, kind of learning those narratives can make watching things through Olympic trials and Olympic games that much more exciting.
Absolutely. I want to circle back to this swimming novice topic for something else, but we're going to table this for now because we had a lot of swimming happen this past week. So let's get right into that. We're starting with Canadian trials because I think that was certainly the most high profile meet with the most on the line, and where we saw a world record and some other really, really great swims. So let's just dive into Canadian trials. What stood out to you the most? Obviously, a highlight was Summer McIntosh's 424 400 IM, but what did you like that you saw out of Canadian trials and out of Toronto, and what do you think the best swims were?
Like you said, obviously the world record for Summer McIntosh, that is can't get much better than a world record. I think it was really interesting. I felt like Summer's kind of playing with us there because you see the 359 in the 400 free, and my immediate thought, she touched the wall. I go, oh, okay, she's on like a drop taper. She doesn't need to be in a world record form to make the team, to hit the Olympic qualifications times and to win her events. But then she seemed really disappointed in that swim. I go, okay, was she expecting like a world record or like a 57 in that kind of drop taper? Then the 200 free, she's only a couple hundredths off her best time. Okay, maybe she was expecting a world record. And then she's clearly on world record form in the 400 IM. Otherwise, Josh Liendo was really impressive, especially in his last swim of the meet in that 100 fly. Just inches away from breaking that 50-second barrier. Is now the fastest swimmer in the world this season in the 100 fly and 5th all time. I think that is definitely really eye-popping, and it shows probably the benefit of training with the world record holder in the event day in and day out. Because I think we saw this in the NCAA season, is that his fly, I mean, he was incredible all around in all three of his events, but his fly was consistently popping out to me that.
Yeah. Let's keep it with these two swimmers because they're obviously the two studs for Team Canada, and then we'll get into some of the other swimmers that kind of stood out to us. But obviously, Summer and Josh both had great meets. So to your point with Summer, it's like you would expect, especially after last season when she had this amazing trials, breaks 2 world records, and then doesn't go as fast at world championships and has really an off 400 free that first day before she goes on to win the 4 IM and 2 fly. You'd think that she would, maybe drop taper for trials. It's not like she needs to do a whole lot to make the team in 4 or 5 individual events here. But it was really interesting how the 400 free, first day right out of the gate seems to be kind of that off event or an event where we've seen her not have as good as of those results, just looking at the world champs last season and then this meet. But then she kind of gets into the meet. And I think this happens with a lot of swimmers where you need a race to really see where you're at in the meet, and then you can settle in a little more. But it seems like a bit of a mixed bag in terms of what we can expect from her going into Paris, just in terms of gold medal favorites, because I think 4 IM, obviously she's the favorite, but I think now the 2 fly, 2 IM, 4 free, people are kind of saying like, well, silver or bronze. What do you take away? What are you thinking here in terms of her individuals in Paris?
Yeah, so I think definitely that 400 free. I mean, 400 free and 200 IM already. Those two are very stacked fields. Those are some of the at least for me, the races I'm most excited for, because it's kind of, I could see any of the top like 3 or 4 people going at it. And I think the 400 free, I wonder how much of it is, Summer McIntosh has been very fast for a time, but we're kind of seeing her most likely be adjusting to this higher profile and status in the sport of, coming off of, I feel like she's able to break that world record a lot easier when you're, it's like your first one, and, on the first swim, not necessarily taking that time to get into the meet. And then you're at world championships as a reigning world record holder in an event. I'm going up. I got Ariane Titmus on one side, Katie Ledecky on the other. Those are some titans in this event. And then get those first race jitters out of the way and then start stacking gold medals. I could, see all. My first thought when I saw, I saw her progress through the meet was, well, maybe she got her off swim in the 400 free out of the way at trials this time, instead of flipping it like she did last summer. Instead of being world record shape at trials, and then a little, then I think she went to 359 again at world championships. Maybe she'll flip it and do 359 and then 355.
I would love to see that. And it's hard to bet against Ariarne in that event at this point, because she's done it, for she's won it on every stage 3 years in a row now, right? Like Olympics, Com Games, and then World Champs last summer, where she blew everyone away. And we know Katie's kind of focusing on the longer distances, so it's not like I don't think she's going to be at her best. And even if she was, Summer and Ariarne's best are also better than her best. So it's I think Katie has a great chance to medal, but I don't know about gold. But it would be awesome for Summer's sake to see Summer just go out and crush the field on day one in the 400 free, just because of where she's been at in that event in the past year.
I think it's going to be one thing that's going to be hard for Summer in the 400 free, specifically in executing the race, is the way that she swims it compared to Ariane. Ariane is very back half heavy. I mean, we've seen how many times has she run down Ledecky, run down Summer and Ledecky, and she has some pretty incredible second to last and last 100 splits compared to Summer. It's got that a little bit more pop and snap and front end speed, and I think it can be hard to, on that high, heavy stakes world scene, go out at that speed without getting in your own head about it. And so I'm hoping that she's able to stick to that race plan, and that's going to be what delivers her best chance for success. And it can be hard because, at a certain point at an Olympic Games, you're going more for racing off of your opponents, what they're going to do, rather than purely going for the best times. And that can, but I think for her, it's going to be the same strategy for both results. I don't think she's going to have as much. If she tries to play Titmus's game and try and out back half her, I don't think you can. That's what she's going to do. You can't start playing the game on her terms, because you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. You got to, and I think that's something that Katie Ledecky was really successful at when she was like a 15-year-old, is that she rocketed out ahead and went, okay, come on, where are you guys?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think whatever Dean Boxall is doing at St. Peter's Western has obviously been working, because Ariarne and Malio, specifically Shayna Jack, even, in her events, it's they know they have those races so dialed in, especially long course and especially those mid-distance freestyles. Yeah, it's they can come home like freight trains. And whatever he's doing, it seems to be working for that group. And I think I agree with you. If Summer's going to do it, she's got to do it from up front, because Titmus knows that race front and back specifically, and she's going to be coming at the end of that race. So, Summer looks great, I think, heading into Paris, but we'll see kind of how some of those races play out. We're going to get to the 200 IM field specifically a little bit later. Yep. And then Josh Liendo, who it's he can have this good of a meet, and we're still kind of he might medal, right? I mean, that's what's crazy to me, is that all three of those fields are so deep that, 21-4, 47.5, I think, and then 50.0,
Yeah.
and it's still like he's not a lock for a medal, let alone a gold medal,
It
right?
feels like there's no medal locks really in those events, especially because there's a lot of, the 100 fly, Milak and Dressel, question mark in terms of what, speed they're going to be at. And then, 100 free, the top two, the number one and number two performers ever are, Pension Law and David Popovich, who both went their fastest swims either not at a world championship or Olympic final, or either at Euros or leading off a relay, have added time from those world record swims in the finals. So it's, well, how's the actual race going to turn out? And then the 50 free is a 50 free.
Right. I mean, I think you could. Well, I was gonna say, I think at this point you can say Cam McAvoy's gonna medal, but like he does so well in prelims, and then he has this history and since his comeback of like adding time in finals that it's like, well, I don't even know about that one at this point.
He did drop in 23, right? He managed to go from, and that was why it won gold. And I think the one thing I know after 24, I was kind of defending Cam McAvoy a little bit, is that he did also say that he was specifically trying to like go out pretty quick in prelims and just go, but he did get slower from prelims to semifinals to finals, which if you're experimenting with it, I don't know if that's necessarily using it as like a training tool to be like, I need to address this problem, because there's no way you don't notice it, because you're the one looking at the results that you see him before anyone else. Touch the wall. Oh,
yeah, and that's a good point. And I think, if you were going to do it at any point, the Doha 24 World Championships were the place to do that. But yeah, it's like at this point, it's even hard to say he's a lock for a medal. And so those events are so deep, but it is great to see Josh Liendo continue his ascent into those sprint ranks. And like you said, training with Dressel has to be an advantage at this point, especially given how Dressel's doing. And we'll talk about him in a minute too, but he's like, he's just such a great leader on the Canadian team seemingly. And then to put up a performance like that seems to bode well for the men's team, especially looking at that 400 free relay that got fourth in Tokyo and is hungry for a medal now.
Is it too late for Condorelli to go back to Canada?
I know. Seriously, that would be epic. I would love to see that.
I think everyone would. I think that would be another instance where SwimSwam just crashes as soon as that news drops.
Seriously. Yeah. Can he do that? What? And somehow he'd find a way, I feel. Right. But so it's like, so we've got the 2 stars from Canada, but then other than that, what were maybe a big surprise for you coming out of the Canadian trials, or a swimmer that you were particularly excited about seeing them make the team or having the performance that they did in Toronto?
I think maybe not necessarily a surprise, but more of a kind of continuation on what we've seen already this season is Finlay Knox in the 200 IM, pivoting over to the men's 200 IM. Like you said, we'll talk about the women's later on. That is, kind of reasserting himself after that gold at 2024 Worlds, but I feel like a lot of people are kind of, very quick to stick an asterisk next to, just because of the nature of that World Championships, talking about, but you can only win the gold medal if you show up for it, and showed up for it and showed up on the day of to touch the wall first. That is currently 4th in the world this season, and it's only 1/100th behind Shane Casas, who is up and down enough so far this season that I could see, someone who's, like I said, 2024 proved he can touch that wall first. I would bet on Knox before Casas in that race, but that is also without a time from Leon Marchand in there. So he's inching closer and closer. You're already somewhat in the medal conversation after you win a world title, no matter what the world championship is, at least in my opinion. But definitely, I feel like as people are, February's kind of far away now. People don't necessarily remember as much. Like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still dropping time, and I'm ready to go in Paris. And so that was really nice to see that kind of continuation on there. And, being so close to the top of the world rankings and right around the bubble of that podium potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like if his progression continues, as you just alluded to, the podium will not be out of reach for him it come Paris time, because he beat Carson Foster head to head, and that was a really gutsy swim for him. And so it seems like if he can keep ascending, an individual medal could be in his future. And I really, as with, I'm guessing, most bigger trials, there was a lot of cool storylines that I really appreciated. Seeing the versatility that Mary Sophie Harvey has been able to grow and progress throughout this season, and then to see that come to fruition for her, getting 100 fly, 200 free individual, and then making it on the 4x1 and 4x2 free relays. It's like, she'll probably be on all 3 Canadian relays, whether in prelims or finals. She has 2 individual swims. Like, for her, it was a real like, oh, what events is she going to be able to swim? What events is she going to be able to make a team in? Like, to see her just kind of blow the doors down and be like, all right, I swam a bunch of events and I made it in a couple, and now I'm going to have a very busy schedule. And Paris is very cool to see for her.
I like seeing that payoff. I think that's really cool. Like, kind of seeing the setup and the payoff for it. It's like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. And then one more storyline I appreciated. We're going to talk about a few of the bigger ones in sink or swim. So Ilya Kharun and Sydney Pickrem, Penny Oleksiak specifically. So we're going to get to those if you're listening now and be like, come on, you got to mention these. But one smaller storyline I really liked is Jeremy Bagshaw makes the Olympic team. He's 32 years old. He's my age. Makes his first Olympic team in the 4x200 free relay. I mean, my most vivid memory of Jeremy Bagshaw is him helping Cal win an NC2A title by getting third in the afternoon heats of the mile in 2014 in Austin, Texas. So a decade ago. So, he finished his NCAA college career a decade ago, and he's been swimming ever since. I don't exactly know his story, but in our article in the where everyone in Canada trains, he trains in Ireland now. So I don't really know what's going on there or why he trains in Ireland, but he's certainly had a significant swimming journey. He's been to at least 2 Olympic trials since finishing his time at Cal in 16 and 21. Didn't make the teams then, but goes ahead and makes his first team this time. And just congrats to Jeremy Bagshaw.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so that was a cool storyline there. And like I said, we're going to get to some of the bigger ones later, but that was Canadian trials in a 15-minute nutshell. I want to move on to the May meets that happened in the US. There were at least 7 that had, serious Olympic contenders competing this weekend, seriously all over the country: Southern California, Arizona, Indianapolis, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Virginia. It's seriously all over the country. But, speaking of Leando's training partner, Caleb Dressel, we saw him in action in Atlanta, as well as Ledecky. Pretty much everyone who will be vying for a spot on the U.S. team. What did you like that you saw out of the many meets this weekend in the U.S.?
And like you said, there's a lot of meets. There's at least 7. We're not going to be able to mention everyone. So if we forgot something that you personally thought was really, really cool, we probably noticed it at some point and are just blanking on it right now. And I would love to read them in the comments.
Please share.
Yes. Because actually trying to keep it straight at certain points, especially with Canadian trials overlapping with a lot of them, like I feel like I had like so many tabs of SwimSwam open of like different live recaps of meets, or just like not live recaps, just going, what's going on? But the Atlanta Classic was definitely one I was really heavily looking forward to because of Caleb Dressel, because he has been at this meet consistently fairly fast. I think what's really interesting about Dressel in general as a swimmer, especially when he's in the middle of this comeback, is that because he's kind of slow in season, and he'll normally be the first one to tell you that. It's like, yeah, it's easy to beat me in season. Is that trying to get a read on where he is for the end of the year? Because you're trying to factor in this really big taper that he always has. Is like, okay, is he, you know, especially at the front end of his comeback, I feel like very few people are kind of looking at it like skeptically now. I feel like most people are like, yeah, he'll be pretty fast. They're trying to gauge that. It's like the extra level is like, is he just going slower, or is this normal in-season Dressel slow? I can't tell. And I mentioned that because the Atlanta Classic was in 2019 was something that was a super big indicator for Dressel, because yeah, he was coming off of like a crazy extended period of time out of the pool like he is for this season, but that was coming off of 2018 where he had a lackluster nationals and that motorcycle accident. And then it was the same kind of question of like, is he going to, you know, he had a really good NCAA season that year, but then kind of wasn't as good in long course. Is this, you know, was 2017 a fluke? Oh, he went a 47 like 8 in the 100 free. That's a good sign. And I think this meet was really interesting for Dressel because it wasn't as eye-popping as a 47-8, but it was a season best in the 100 free, which is a really good sign. He's continuing to steadily improve. Yeah, 48.30. And then he was also 51.3 in the 100 fly, which is with some interesting splitting, because I know it's showing the he's back in a 26.1, but if you look at the video, it doesn't look like he's as far back as that would have suggested. I read that in the comments of the SwimSwam article, and because I remember watching the race live, and I was looking because it's kind of hard to see on the feed where everyone was, and I was like, Dressel 1 second 0.08 behind. That didn't look right. And so it seems like it's most likely like missed the hand touch on the pad, but then when he like went back, his feet hit it. But even if you kind of reverse, you know, try and like add however much time you think that would take on, it's still a fast back half. And that was kind of the theme that we saw with Dressel in general, was just his back half splits. Like his 100 free has been really back half heavy all season. And I think it's something that he kind of skews towards in season a little bit. Is a strong back half. And I think it's just because when he kind of needs that taper to get a bit more of that explosiveness back, that just seems to be how his body behaves under heavy load, is that he just needs that rest to be able to get that crazy Dressel like advantage off the blocks. And it's also really cool seeing him contest the 200 free and be within a second of his lifetime best with, again,
47.3, I think.
Yeah, 3. And it was, I think it was like 0.75 exactly off of his like 146 and change from 2021 trials prelims, which he was obviously in really good shape at that meet. What was it?
When he teased us by swimming a 200 free.
Everyone was like, he's going to be in the relay. Dang it.
Nah, yeah. And then of course we get 4th in that relay, and everyone's like, should have used Caleb. And I'm not faulting anyone for that, but it was a funny situation. But
my hot take on that is that I actually don't know if it would have really changed the result, because everyone does the math off of Zach Apple's split. But going into it, I'm pretty sure based on how people performed at trials, I could be a little off on here, but I think it would have been like Kibler that they would have replaced, because I don't think Apple was necessarily in the conversation as like the 4th guy that they would switch out. I think Apple would have still been on the relay, but people like to do the math that's most beneficial to Dressel, bumping them up into medal conversation. But I remember when in the discussion in like the days before that, it wasn't always Apple as like a sure thing. And a lot of times with how deep the US is and some of like, you know, like the 100 free, the 200 free, trying to piece together those relays, is sometimes they just got to roll the dice on who they think. And obviously they see more than we do at home because they actually like work with them in practice and stuff like that. But I think, you know, in the training camps leading up to it.
Absolutely.
But what about any of the other swimmers at the Atlanta Classic? We talked a lot about Dressel. What do you think? Since we got to keep all of the meets in order, staying on the Atlanta Classic.
Right. No, way to get us back on topic. I appreciate that. Katie looked good. I'm liking what I'm seeing from her. She put up the 17th fastest performance of all time in the mile or something like that. 13th, 17th.
Add us to the list.
Right. Like, she put up a great mile. She was good in the 400, I think. She was below. Did she go under 4 minutes? I honestly don't remember.
I think she did.
It's like she had a solid swim there, 155 in the 200 free, which like she just makes that look pedestrian. It's crazy. But it's like you can tell she's sharpening the knife. So kind of same with Dressel. And so it she's done this. She's been to this rodeo so many times that it's like, okay, she's where she needs to be. That's what I get from that. The other swimmer I was really looking for or at there was Bella Sims, because we still, 200 free, 400 free is kind of her sweet spot in long course, I think. But she very much has the potential to do other races at trials, and I think she was 158 in the 200 free. She looked solid, and I think this might not be a year where she goes best times in long course, just because it's her freshman season of college. She's adjusting to new training. She's adjusting to a completely new lifestyle, a new place to live. Like I think people often forget how much change that is. And like, even if she doesn't feel like it's that much change, like you're still adapting, your body's still adapting, your mind is still adapting. And so I'm not expecting a ton from her, but it's still, I think having a presence like her on an Olympic team is significant. So I'm hoping she can still make that team, because she's been there before and she is still very young. So that's what I was seeing from the Atlanta Classic that I liked. I think, I was at the Longhorn Elite invite in Austin. We saw a 410, 400 IM from Carson Foster, which I think is promising. After the race, he was kind of like, I was hoping that would either be a 414 or a 406. So it would like really tell me one way or the other, because 400 IM and 200 free are on the exact same day. At trials in the Olympics. So it's like he can't do both. And those are, probably his two best events. And so he has to choose, and he ended up going 147.1 in the 200 free. And I think that will push him towards the 400 IM, but he seemed very confident in his 200 free. And so I don't envy him for having to make that decision, because that is really a bummer of having to choose one or the other.
Do you think he was, when he split 143 at 2024 Worlds, do you think he was slightly upset because it introduced this question much more? It like reaffirmed that, like, oh wait, that was a really fast split. Great. Now I need to reevaluate this. Also, I looked at the results during that. Ledecky was 359.44 in the 400 free, which is solid.
Yeah. Great. That's a great in season for Ledecky.
Before we pivot away to other meets other than just the Atlanta Classic, I used to touch on the Longhorn. I just want to mention, you talking about the mile with Ledecky reminded me that Bobby Fink, under 15 in that mile, was pretty promising, especially coming hot off the news about Ahmed Hafnawi's kind of questionable, not super hot, but relatively hot off the news. Yeah. For a distance swimmer, it's very hot off the news. It's really promising. I think that was like his first time ever, if I'm remembering reading some article correctly, under 15, under 15 in season, which is pretty substantial. So he's already just looking good in general, and then looking good compared to possible top competitor not being there. But going to some of the other meets around was one thing that I didn't even clock until recently was the Ryan Held in the Sun Devil Open, also 48.30, which just highlights how we've talked a lot and are going to talk a lot more about how some events are just, you kind of look at them trying to project and go, this is going to be crazy. And we're kind of looking at Paris. This is probably the most for me at trials, maybe with like women's backstroke in there, where it's, I don't know, this, especially with the relay spots in here, like we're going out to 6, and I'm still, I don't know, because you have Chris Giuliano is 47.4, which is
right.
crazy. It kind of scares me every time I like look at the world rankings. I'm like, oh yeah, I've kind of forgot about that because it's time trial.
I think everyone did until this, or yeah, I certainly did as well until this weekend. And then it's like, oh Jesus, because he did it at the ACC time trial, so he was obviously in very fine form. Like he was, I think it's probably fair to say he was like tapered, rested, the whole nine at those ACCs. So like, that's a really good swim. But yeah, every time it's just like, oh God, yeah, that was really
that's another factor. And then King is 48.0, Jack Alexi 48.24 right now. And then you now have two 48.30s right behind that. That's 5 already. And a lot of them are within, let's see, from King to Held and Dressel, that's only 0.28. That's crazy.
It is, and I want to use this to transition into a question that I'm gonna kind of spring on you, but I'll answer it first. Right. So it's not too. But so circling back to novice swimmers or casual swim fans, I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was like, "So is there anyone who's like a lock to make the U.S. Olympic team?" And I was like, that's a good question. And I'm sure it's a question a lot of people are wondering as they're kind of mulling towards swimming now that the Olympics are coming up, and like, I had a few different tiers. So, and I'm just curious if people come to mind on the top of your head, because the Olympic trials is by design a more pressure-filled meet than the Olympic Games itself in the United States. And it is designed to put these athletes through the ringer. And so like nothing is guaranteed until you make the team, until you get your hand on the wall. But if I was going to say like, okay, for sure, pending, injury or serious illness, who can I rely on? Tier 1, Katie Ledecky, Bobby Fink, because I think they're so far ahead of the pack in their events that they'll make at least one event, right? Tier 2, Ryan Murphy, Reagan Smith, for the same reason of they have enough events, and they're the depth in their events is such that I think they're going to make at least one, right? And then like tier 2.5 for me would be Lily King. But like, other than that, I don't think I could definitively say anyone else is a lock. Obviously, there's safe money on a lot of other athletes, but to me, those are like the athletes who have performed consistently enough over the last 3 to 10 years that like I know how they're going to show up, or I know beyond reasonable doubt how they're going to show up. I'm curious what you think of this question and who might be on your list aside from those athletes.
I do enjoy the fact that it was tier 1 distance swimmers, tier 2 backstrokers.
Right. I feel like, yeah.
And I think those are kind of the immediate swimmers that come to mind. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't, because I feel like a good way to think about it is that tier 1 is they can make the team if they have a bad swim. They can have, whatever their equivalent of Summer going a 3:59, which is fast, but slower than she was looking for. They can do that. And even if someone beats Ledecky in an 800, which would be crazy.
Two people won't.
Yeah, it's definitely not two. Like, I wonder, like, could she cramp off the start and still go and still like at least get second?
Right.
Probably.
Yeah.
And especially, I feel like the reason why it trended towards distance swimmers is the fact that you have a lot more margin for error. Like you need to be having not just a bad swim, because in 50 free, you could have a bad 30 seconds before your race. You just might not, you might be slightly out of the zone and you're out of it. A mile, you kind of need to be having a bad day, maybe even a bad week to slip that far.
The wheels need to fall off.
Yeah.
And like not just one of them, like 3 or 4 of them, right?
And you need to be riding a unicycle by the end of it.
Exactly.
And then like you said it pretty well with the with your tier 2 swimmers. I like the tier 1, tier 2. I think that's a good way to good way to phrase, especially with like novice swim fans, because that's something that you can strip away any swimming specific terms and everyone's going to kind of know what you're talking at. Is, you know, they have a really, you know, because Regan Smith, when you started talking, was like one of the first things that popped in my mind ahead of your tier 1 swimmers. And then it's like, yeah, but those races are competitive enough that a bad swim, a bad day might knock you out. I wouldn't think it was likely. You know, if you ask, I'm not going to fill up my Pickems like that.
Exactly.
But I would be surprised, but I wouldn't go, the world is ending, you know, like that. I mean, we saw it in 2021 for Regan Smith.
Exactly.
In the 200 back. Yeah. But she also still made the team, so.
Right. Yeah. It's like, it's a very small percentage, but yeah, it's like in her events, there are women who are good enough that if she's not on it in all 3 events, then like it could happen. Yeah.
Would you say if Carson Foster decided to choose, that's an interesting thing, is I feel like if Carson Foster chose the 200 free, like if we knew he was locking in at that and not the 400 IM, he might actually be in that tier 2.5 or tier 2. But at the same time, because I mean, 6 people out of them, but again, that might be at the best tier 2, because that's still, you know, bad swim can throw you off. But at the same time, in the 400 IM, I mean, you got Chase Kalish, who's always just kind of, I think he tries to make everyone forget about him. He tries to blend into the background, and he's like, yes, I have in fact not retired.
Exactly. And it's like,
and then Bobby Fink.
Yeah. And then, you know, Jay Litherland is still there. And again, Carson has shown he can do it for the last 3 years, but we've also seen the situation at 21 trials where Jay Litherland ran him down, you know, and you have 2 of those guys. I think Bobby Fink might have said he's swimming 4 free instead of 4 IM, but even if he's not swimming 4 IM, you know, Jay is lurking. And so it's like, if you're not on your game, it's a possibility.
I love watching Jay Litherland swim. One of my favorite underrated swims is him in 2019 at 400 IM almost getting Seto. That I sometimes go back and watch that, just like watch that last 100. I'm like, he's not even anywhere near them. But that is a really interesting, like, it's twofold, right? Is that it's a good way to explain things like that, a question to a novice swimming fan. But for experienced swim fans, I'm sitting here, I'm still trying to think of new names to bring into the conversation. Yeah. And every single time I'm like, well, what about Nick Fink? Oh, well, no, there's like enough stuff that's close. Like when we're talking about that, like how guaranteed are there? There's certainly a lot of favorites, but there's too many favorites in some events, and there can only be 2.
And like, especially with a case like Nick Fink, again, will he be on my Pickems? Yes. But he really only has the 100. Yeah. Like I don't have faith in him in the 200, especially not at an Olympic trials, because Olympic trials does not favor age in the 200 breast. And again, like he is on the older side for swimmers. And at Olympic trials, that is where age can kind of show, and youth just being like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed can really give you an advantage in an Olympic trials final where you know, we've seen Nick Fink run people down countless times in the last 50, and like this could be the time where he gets run down. And I'm not saying I want that to happen. I'm not saying I think it could happen or I think it will happen, but I think it could happen.
Yes. And that's definitely the sticking point, is anytime you think you have a safe pick, but what if, but what about this swimmer?
Right. Because there are always those races at trials, and it's not every race, but there are always those races.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, in the comments, let us know who your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 2.5 or 3 swimmers are. Because yeah, it is a fun game. Okay, we've rambled a little too long, so we gotta move on from this. Let's finish up this podcast with sink or swim. First up today on sink or swim, Penny Oleksiak wins the 50 free and the 100 free Canadian trials, but does not have an individual A cut. So she's going to go to a meet reportedly in about a month to try to pick up the A cut so she can swim individually. She's on the Canadian team, but she doesn't have an A cut to swim an individual event yet. Sink or swim, Penny O gets her Olympic A cut in the 100 free and is able to at least go for the 100 free final.
I think it can be sometimes difficult to try and focus on just the one event and the one time that you're going for, because there's trade-off, right? On one hand, you're just focusing on the one thing. You can be that specialist, and like that's probably going to be what she's thinking about in practice and practicing things like that. At the same time, I think it can sometimes negatively impact you mentally, because especially with that pressure of it's kind of like Jake Mitchell in the 400 free at Olympic trials, where it's all about the time. And yeah, that worked out really well for him, but it can also, when you don't have a literal stadium cheering for you for that time, might be harder. But on the flip side, it's not like it's just one opportunity. I saw, we don't necessarily know at this moment in time what meet she's going to be targeting for it. I saw one thing floated by that could be Mare Nostrum, and then that's multiple stops that would provide multiple chances. And I think that probably makes a lot of sense in terms of trying to get as many chances as possible. And I think the more chances you add when you're that close, 5/100ths away, that's enough for me to swim it.
I agree. I think Penny has been doing this for long enough. And I think she's kind of like refound her love of the sport. And she's obviously not in top form of her in the top form of her career in terms of the times she's going. But I think that veteran experience is going to come in a moment like this, where it's like, okay, I have to be clutch and I have to just get the job done. And she's proven individually, she's proven on relays, like she knows how to get the job done, right? She just won 2 events at trials and, didn't go best times, but like certainly went season best. And I think that with a little bit more training, wherever she decides to go, whether it's Mare Nostrum, whether it's the Grand Challenge at the end of May in LA where she's training, whether it's the Mel Zajac meet in Western Canada, like I've heard all these ideas floated, and it's like, I think she's going to be ready, and I think she's going to be able to better her season best and get the A cut as well. Next up on Sink or Swim, we also had a meet in Australia this weekend where one of the huge highlights was 19-year-old Iona Anderson dropping a 58.5 in the 100 back, huge best time for her, and definitely putting her in the discussion to podium in Paris. So Sink or Swim, does Iona podium in Paris?
It's a tough field. I mean, right now, that time, 58.5 is fast. It's 6th in the world this season, and there's 357s.
This season, not even
all time.
Without,
yeah. There's 357s going 1 through 3, and that is probably my podium pick too. I feel like Kayla McEwen, Regan Smith, and then Kylie Moss in some order. Probably the most probable is probably the order I just listed them. But that seems to be the safest bet. And also even trying to, if one of them has an off swim, Olsen probably needs to get back past the second American, because that's been a tough spot. Like, wasn't Catherine Burkhoff, wasn't she 58.0 at trials last year?
That sounds right. Yeah.
I think it was like really close to 57, like scary close. And whoever gets that second spot in the one bag, the second American question mark TBD, that's going to be another body that you need to get past to get on that podium. And I think it's Anderson versus the field, and I'm going to give it to the field, and I'm going to sink it.
Yeah, I gotta sink it as well, just because how crazy would it be if Kylie Moss won gold? Like, I would love to see that just for the drama it brought.
That would be fun.
But I mean, she's obviously in top form, going her best time since Tokyo at these Canadian trials last weekend. But yeah, I think the field is too deep for, at this point, to say a 58.5 can medal. But again, Olympics is a great time to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, because she's 19. Like, if anyone's going to make a huge drop, she could. But as it sits now, I'm sinking as well. Next up, Sydney Pickrem went 2:07.7 in the 200 IM at Canadian trials. She made individuals in the 2 breast and the 2 IM, but very solidly put her name back in contention in an already exceedingly stacked field that includes Kate Douglas, Alex Walsh, Kaylee McEwen, Summer McIntosh. I think you can even include Tori Husk in that conversation at this point as well after her swim from San Antonio. But, 2 Americans regardless. I mean, that field's going to be crazy, but sink. So at this point, sink or swim, you're putting Pickrem on that 2 IM podium.
That is because, like you said, it's not back-to-back really tough women's fields in these events. I'd say 400 free, 100 and 200 back, and 200 IM are some of the most hotly contested. And I think she's been improving. I feel like she's at a stage in her career where you'd expect her to kind of be like maintaining more. If you looked at like other swimmers, you'd be like, oh yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you just keep kind of like holding like maybe a 10th either direction on your personal best. And she's had a couple of personal bests after being stuck in the similar range for a while. And it's interesting that looking at her splits, like her biggest drop was on the breaststroke leg, which is like her strongest, because you would expect that any other time you see an IMer drop, it's normally because they're improving their weaknesses. Summer McIntosh is a perfect example. She had an insane drop to break her world record in the breaststroke leg, and Leanne Marchand has been steadily improving that backstroke leg. It's interesting to see that, which does not at all play into my decision to sink or swim. I just thought that it was neat and wanted to share it with the world. But because again, it's the exact same reasoning I had for the previous question. It's just a loaded field, and she's definitely inched herself closer that she can get by someone. But as it stands, there's just too many strong competitors in between her and that podium spot. So it's going to be another sink.
I think it plays into her favor that she has podium experience before. Like, she knows what it takes to make a final and to perform in a final. And B, she's going to have the least busy schedule of everyone I mentioned before that. And the 2 IM falls at the end of the meet, right? So she's going to be, I think, the most rested because Summer, Kaylee, Kate, the second American, like, they're going to have super busy schedules. If Alex Walsh makes it, she won't. She will have that advantage too, right? But those three kind of juggernauts, I'm guessing, are going to have very busy schedules, and so it's going to play into the favor of someone like Sydney Pickrem or Alex Walsh, who's going to be a little more fresh, I'm guessing, for that event. But I think Sydney had a sensational swim in her home country, and I think she can perform. But yeah, it's like at this point, I can't say, like, I think she would have to go at around or under her best time that she just went to medal at this point. It might take 2:06 to win, and it might take 2:07.5 to medal. And at this point, I can't give that to her yet. So I'm gonna sink it as well. And then last up, Ilya Kharun wins the 200 fly, makes his first Olympic team for Canada at trials, and then says, I want more. I want to beat Leon Marchand, who's obviously, until pretty recently, his training buddy, right? And so I think that was like super fun. I think Ilya, obviously, he was taking a shot at Leon, but it's also like they're friends, it's not like this is like an intense rivalry or anything. So I thought that was awesome to see. But, obviously Ilya wants to win. And I think it's cool to hear swimmers voice that. So sink or swim, Ilya, I'm not going to say tops the podium because someone else could win, Milok, but is Ilya going to beat Leon in the 200 fly specifically? And we'll say if you swim it it also counts if Leon doesn't swim it.
Okay.
Then Ilya beats him by default.
It would be so funny if you didn't swim it after so many people sounding off about the schedule change, and then it's like, I'm actually just gonna do 2 breast.
Right.
I didn't even want to swim the 2 fly. Bob just didn't want me to have an excuse.
Yeah. Exactly.
But comparing their personal best, Leon's at 152.4, Ilya's at 153.8. So, and those are both from 23 worlds, where obviously Leon won the race and won the world title.
Wait,
since
Leon was what? Sorry, he went 152 at those worlds, right?
Yes. Did I misspeak?
Okay. Sorry, maybe I misheard you.
152.4. That's what I have written down from his from his best time.
That's correct. That's correct.
I could have misspoken. I could have flipped some of the I've done that before. One time actually I said someone on the American women relay did a 145 instead of 154 200 free. They're like, put her in with the men, please. Like, oh no. I was on some SwimSwam TikTok a while back. But since then, Ilya has improved more than Leon in short course yards, and they have both swam that before, because Leon's best time is still from the mid-season in the 2022-2023 season.
Yeah.
So there is a path for Ilya to get past Leon there, and kind of in a similar vein to what you were saying about Pickrem in the 200 IM. Once you start taking the overall schedule into account and trying to manage that could play in Ilya's favor, especially in a 200 fly, which is, I hear, a rather difficult event to swim.
Dude, especially if Leon does the double, right? The
yeah.
2 breasts.
I forget which one's first.
I have the schedule in front of me. Let me pull it up. The men's 200 fly final is first.
Okay. But who's to say how much that's in your mind, right? If he thinks he's safe to try and get that second gold that night, if he does both and then doesn't see Ilya closing or something like that. I am, just because I enjoy the shot at Leon, and I think it's fun for swimmers to voice their goals, and I think not enough swimmers do it, I'm going to swim it.
I love that reasoning. I very much appreciate that why. I'm gonna sink it just because I want to see Leon go off in Paris. Like, it's his
that's another good reason.
Like, it is his moment. Like, it's not because of any like logical, well, the numbers say this. Like, I purely just want to see Leon win every event he swims, relay or individual, because I want him to have as many gold medals as he can possibly rack up in Paris, and then reap the benefits of that. But I mean, honestly, I think he'd be insane if he swims 200 fly and 200 breast. Like, I don't think that's a good idea. And obviously, I'm not his coach. I don't know what they'll do, but like, just pick one, like, go for 3 individual gold medals. That's really good. Yeah. And like, hopefully he gets it. But like, I think if he goes for the 200 fly, I think he will beat Ilya. I think he can beat anyone, unless Christoph Milak is like, oh, I'm going to go 150 again.
Yeah.
But that's where I stand on that one. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the SwimSwam Breakdown. Thank you, David. If you haven't already, don't forget, go subscribe to his YouTube channel at the SwimScribe for all your swimming stories. And we will see you next time.